Hello friends, welcome to another episode of BayView Views. Today we're going to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. Very exciting topic to talk about. I think they're calling it this because they believe that they can bring down food and energy prices in the long run with increased spending on these categories today. We hope this disinflation actually happens, but this bill is similar to most previous acts in that it is it's a significant government spending bill. That's tend to be what these things do. The act does include provisions to raise revenue and therefore hopefully reduce budget deficits in the future. But this is more of a spending bill with goals to kind of lower prescription drug costs, the funding of new energy, climate, and healthcare initiatives. We have roughly $268 billion of actual spending and then another $270 billion of tax credits. So you have about $500 billion of projected tax increases. $200 billion of that, by the way, or 40% of that number is coming from increased IRS tax enforcement. So that's a really big ask from the IRS, and can they actually do that? So one of the primary objectives of the act is to help renewable energy companies. Again, we've been trying to do this for probably decades now. The broad, sustainable energy sector will see a long-term benefit and boost in spending, and this should provide, important accelerant for climate change adaptation and mitigation issues. Will it be enough to alter the fundamentals and make these investments attractive, which is what we've seen in the past? That's really hard to say. Free markets work best, in my opinion, for the proper flow of capital. But if this capital does go into the infrastructure that helps facilitate, the manufacturing of things like solar panels or electric cars, then we should see broad benefits sooner, to the general public. The final bill includes nearly about $40 billion of agriculture and forestry and rural development as well. This is funding for things like the agricultural conservation easement, the conservation stewardship program, environmental quality initiatives, and the regional conservation program. With regards to healthcare, there's some savings for seniors out there, which is probably well received. The act promises to reduce certain prescription drug costs, particularly for Medicare recipients. Much of the potential cost savings to families will depend on, obviously, individual circumstances. Do you use those, particular drugs? From 2025 on, though, the out-of-pocket maximum for all Medicare-covered prescriptions will be about $2,000 per person per year. So that is a little bit of relief. Giving Medicare the ability to negotiate drug prices will probably help over the long term. But given the limited scope and the gradual rollout, it's really going to take some time for all of us to see the benefits of that. So this is estimated to save Medicare spending about $265 billion over 10 years, which is a lot of money and really needed for Medicare. Another item extends a temporary expansion, to the Affordable Care Act. Due to COVID, there was a one-year moratorium on income, the income cap that they had for federal subsidies offered to kind of low and middle income households. Well, now the cutoff won't be reinstated until 2025. So this is especially good news for those that retired early or perhaps because of maybe even bad health and, are not yet old enough for Medicare. So where does the revenue come from this bill? Well, the first one is that ugly, we don't even like taxes ever, but that 15% corporate minimum tax. And there's a lot of confusing on this, so maybe I'll give you a little bit of clarity. First of all, to be affected by this, you have to have an average of $1 billion in annual revenue profits for the last 3 years. Well, we're only talking about 125 companies that would be in this category. We all know that book income is very different from taxable income. We hear about, companies not paying enough taxes all the time. But corporations essentially keep two sets of books, one for financial reporting, one for tax purposes. And there are all kinds of differences between them. But most have to do with the various tax expenditures. So you have subsidies for various types of corporate activities that are reflected in taxable income, but not in book income. You really want book income to accurately reflect the financial picture of the company, the health of the company. So corporations are going to take advantage of tax expenditures wherever they're possible. Again, that's the law. They do that. As a result, though, their effective tax rate becomes very low. And that's good for them. But that's where the corporate AMT comes in. You look at a company's book income, and you apply this minimum 15% tax rate. And once you do that, you calculate the two tax results. One under the normal corporate tax rate, which is at 21% right now, and then one under this broader based book income tax at 15%. And then what happens is the company will pay the higher of the two. And so the CBO actually claims that this will generate another $222 billion in tax revenue, and essentially, again, from those 125 companies. Will those companies pass those costs on to you and I? Probably, right? Another area would be share buybacks, and we're hearing a lot about that now. So the Act will impose a 1% tax increase on corporate share buybacks, right? Remember, buybacks are an indirect way of returning profits to shareholders, which in turn increases the company's earnings per share, and therein increases the share price. Well, if the new tax makes companies reduce share buybacks, many of them may choose to reward shareholders in another way, like increasing their dividends. And if many companies again switch to dividend payments, this could cause a pretty big increase in the popularity of dividend-paying stocks. But companies could also decide to use this money in different ways, like debt reduction and other things. What we do know is that companies are very smart, and they're going to figure out a way to best minimize taxes and increase shareholder value. The final category is the IRS, which is, again, a huge bureaucracy anyway. But the Act is going to provide some $80 billion in new spending for the IRS over the next 10 years. And more than half of this is going to be intended to beef up the auditing, particularly for high-income earners. They claim that much of this Act's revenue, remember it's about 40%, is going to be paid for from the increases in these tax collection receipts from this category alone. Well, you know, the IRS claims that they have been cash-strapped for years, so apparently this increased funding is only a drop in the bucket from what they need. So even with the new capital, will we see the agency be able to transform itself into a more efficient government branch? That almost sounds like an oxymoron. I don't think so. History is certainly not on their side. So although the Act calls for deficit reduction over time, I really don't see that happening. I see this as, again, another one falling short of its objective. Guys, we hope that this video has brought some clarity about the Inflation Reduction Act. And again, we thank you as always for tuning in for another episode of BayView Views. If you have any questions or comments about it, about anything financial, again, we try to be somebody that's a great resource for you guys. But feel free to reach out. We'll be glad to help. Have an awesome day.